Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. In a few minutes, we'll meet the new CEO of Marin General Hospital, Lee Domanico.
Peter, today our first guest is Assemblymember Michael Allen. Michael Allen is a Democrat serving his first term in the State Assembly. With redistricting, he's moving down to Marin, where he's going to be running for the newly drawn 10th Assembly District, which includes Marin and Sonoma County. Before his election as an Assembly member in Sonoma, he worked as District Director for State Senator Pat Wiggins. He was Executive Director of the Service Employees International Union 707, was on the Sierra Club Legal Defense team, and has worked as a nurse. Welcome to Marin Voices and Views.
Well, hi.
Good to see you.
You moved down here
Right.
after living in Sonoma County for 30 years. There's a new political map. That's what brought you down here. Other than learning that it costs a lot to rent an apartment or buy a house down here, what are you learning about Marin?
Well, you know, what I'm learning about Marin is that people truly love this part of the world. And when I talk to people, a lot of what I hear is concern of not losing the quality of life that you have here. And so there seems to be a little bit of anxiety about change, you know, and because if you like the way things are, you don't want to see them change. On the other hand, realizing that not changing isn't tenable either. So, you know, most of what I heard about so far down here has been about the SMART train, and there's been a little bit of discussion of water, but a lot of it is just trying to meet people and introduce myself and find out what's on their mind.
So, Smart Train is our first agenda item.
Okay.
And you've got an interesting perspective from, you know, our view here in Marin, because you've seen it from Sonoma County's point of view. I support the Smart Train. I voted for it, but I see support is eroding because of concern over the costs and how to pay for it, and because of the constant scaling back of the construction plans. So what's your thought about SMART and how to get it funded and get it built?
Well, you know, I worked on both of the campaigns, the first campaign and the second campaign to get SMART in. And then when SMART was voted in by the public, I served on the Citizens Oversight Committee, which was made up of Marin and Sonoma residents. So I did get to hear a lot of the Marin perspective even at that time. And to me, I think a lot of the concern about it not moving quickly enough is well founded. I think a lot of people were hoping that we would have at least construction started by now. I do know that for my part, I've asked to meet with the new executive director of SMART to find out.
Can you pronounce his name?
No, I can't yet. But
Farhud Mansourian.
Okay, Mansourian I can get, but thank you. And
He's a show-off.
I know, show off, but I just want to find out exactly what are the challenges and if there are things that we can do at the state level to help. I do know that it's not unusual to build transit systems in stages, so I do think it makes sense to build between San Rafael and Santa Rosa for beginners, but I think the eventual plan is to fully build out the system. I mean, for me, I guess the question I would have is that we need options. I call 101. I have to drive up and down that corridor frequently, and I call it Blood Alley. I constantly seeing accidents. I'm seeing huge traffic jams, snarls, and it just seems to me that if we don't have a commuter train, we have to have some way of improving the transportation for the region. And so, my attitude right now as an elected official is that unless and until the public says we don't want to go in that direction, if there is an election on this issue, then it's our job to make it work. And our job is to make it work as efficiently and as effectively as possible, as quickly as we can. And so it's my hope that with this new fellow, who I won't try to pronounce his name, coming on board, that we'll find ways working together cooperatively to move it faster.
One of the iconic structures in Marin County, despite everything, is San Quentin.
Yes.
And it's here, and there's lots of views of what to do with it and what it does itself. Do you have a view on the death penalty, and if you do, what is that? And do you think that San Quentin should be kept as a prison and used as a death facility, or are there other ways to utilize the property or parts of that property?
Well, first of all, the way I would distinguish it is that from my own personal view and from a moral standpoint, I don't believe in the death penalty. And I've never voted for the death penalty because I believe that there's the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the Old Testament speaks for an eye, but I don't feel that, and I've talked to a lot of victims' families regarding this, and there's no consensus. It usually doesn't bring closure. You can never bring back which was lost through an act of violence. So to me, the other piece of it is, since the public has voted for the death penalty, my big beef with it is we're not doing it. We're not actually doing what the public asked for, and we're spending millions upon millions of dollars keeping people in this state of waiting to be executed and not being executed. So from that standpoint, it's not working either. And I think anybody who's actually read about deterrence, we know that deterrence is, if you're using that as an argument for the death penalty, that's not a viable argument because it's not a deterrent. People do these horrible things for many different reasons, but it's very unusual that they really are deterred because they know there's the death penalty. In terms of San Quentin property, I just think this has to do with the whole issue of us warehousing so many people who maybe should not be incarcerated, the people who basically have committed nonviolent crimes or are there for different reasons. And so I think that part of what we're going to see with Governor Brown and realignment is trying to move some of those people out of prison. And also I think we just have to take a look at our procedures for granting paroles. There was a very famous case a couple of months ago where there was an elderly quadriplegic that couldn't get a parole out of prison. Yeah, a quadriplegic. Because there were still concerns about safety concerns. And so one thing, I don't know whether you've read this book or not, but I'd really recommend Kamala Harris's book, Smart on Crime, because it seems like a lot of the political dialogue is, either you're soft on crime or you're hard on crime. But I think we need to be smart on crime, and because frankly, we can't afford the kind of criminal justice system we've created, where we're shortchanging our schools and all these other priorities by yes, we want to keep the public safe, but are we actually doing it with the present system we have? So San Quentin would be a piece of that in terms of it being used for other things and having folks in there who maybe could go to other facilities.
Michael Allen, you've been active with Solar Sonoma, and you chair the Accountable Development Coalition. Both of those are focused on green jobs. With the Solyndra bankruptcy, the sizzle of green jobs is fading a little bit. What can we realistically expect in terms of job growth in the renewable energy sector? Not the cheering stand, but the people who actually do those jobs.
From my vantage point, the jobs in the renewable energy sector are going to slowly grow, and it's going to be maybe 2 to 4% of the workforce and grow over time. I think where you're going to see the real growth in green jobs is actually taking a look conceptually at all jobs and how they're done, and turning them into greener jobs, so that whether it's by waste reduction or energy reduction, or the way that we even do our accounting in terms of what is the bottom line versus the triple bottom line, a lot of the jobs themselves will become greener. So to my way of thinking is that if we want to wean ourselves off of foreign oil, and we want to essentially grow our economy, I think some astounding amount of money, I think they calculated is something like $500 billion a year is being spent for non-renewable energy sources, that if we could find ways to bring that in and reinvest in ourselves, it would account for huge job growth. Probably the most obvious thing for job growth that we could do is to incentivize and work on our PACE program so that people could retrofit their businesses and homes and save energy that way, and also use less energy. And we have so much construction that's already been built that could be retrofitted that it would create a huge number of jobs, especially in the inner cities for folks where unemployment is at the highest. But it would work in any county. So I think that particular area in particular, retrofitting, huge potential for growth and rapidly.
One of the things that I think you've identified that people love about Marin, people love living here, is our beautiful state parks. And were you surprised that there was a rejection by the voters of an additional fee on a car tax that would have paid for these parks? And are there alternatives to keeping these functional and working either public-private or nonprofit public ways to make sure that we could continue to enjoy our parks rather than see them closed?
Well, folks up here like with Jared Huffman, myself, and Wes Chesborough, and we were disproportionately hit by the state park closure because we live in a very beautiful part of the world that has a huge amount of parks. And so I know that locally in this area, Marin, Sonoma, the areas that really have a lot of state parks, there was support for the tax. But statewide, when you're having large unemployment and people being really worried about every penny, no, I wasn't surprised that it failed because I think that a lot of people I think did not believe that there would actually be a closure of the state parks. They felt like it was like a hollow threat. Mm-hmm. And in fact, as we're seeing that it's one thing to say that you're going to close the state parks, it's quite another to do it. It causes a host of legal problems. So I think I co-authored with Jared the bill regarding allowing some nonprofits to help out with the management and financing of state parks. But I see this as, there's nothing wrong with the legislation. I supported it, but it's a Band-Aid. I think that what I would like to do is to find, and I'll give you an example. Right now, the Bureau of Land Management was audited, and we're losing somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million a year in the way we're managing our leases with property that's owned by the state. If we could collect that money and direct that flow to the state parks, and just using this as one example, we could keep the parks open.
Isn't that one of the biggest problems, that we hear that parks are going to close or state services are going to be cut back, and no one believes it?
Yeah, I do think that's a problem, and I think actually with the fact that we've had a series of years now with budget cuts, people are going to start seeing these effects actually come home, whether it's the state parks, but especially in education.
So, be honest with us. Why do you want to stay in the Assembly? We've cut your pay, we took away your car, you don't get a pension, and the Republicans block every meaningful effort, particularly to balance the budget in this state, that Democrats bring on. Add to that the unpredictability of a Democratic governor who vetoed hundreds of bills authored by members of his own party this year. So what keeps you in it, and how do you maintain a positive attitude in such a difficult environment?
Well, first of all, chemically, I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist in my life. And second of all, a lot of my background has been in mediation and negotiation. And I do believe that, sometimes there's not silver bullets for every particular problem in life, but a lot of times you can make incremental differences and change. And as we were talking before the show began, there was a number of bills I got passed this year that I got passed with Republican co-authors. So I think that sometimes it's important to find the areas of agreement. Like you might not be able to find Republicans who agree on health care reform, but they do agree that, for instance, state hospitals should be a safe place for patients and staff. And so sometimes you have to choose your battles. And so to me, I feel very fortunate because I had a full career. I retired in my 50s with a pension. I was an attorney who did very well. And I came back into public service working for Senator Wiggins because I do believe there is a place for government, and people want to see government work well, and that government is supposed to be there to empower society to be able for people to get their goals met. Whether you want to go to school or you want a small business, government should be there as your partner. And so I'm one of these people who actually believe that government can be something that actually, when it's done correctly, makes life better for people by providing those essentials that make things possible. Like for instance, whenever I hear government doesn't create jobs, it drives me crazy because it's simply not true. Think about what would business do if they didn't have freeways or if they didn't have all the infrastructure or the water systems that basically are the undergirding for our entire economy. The internet itself was a DARPA project, and so there's so many examples where our colleges, where all the research has gone out to both nonprofits and for-profits that have enriched all our lives. So there's a huge role to be played in government. I think that where we get into trouble sometimes is when we had a lot of this in the 80s and 90s during the Clinton era, where there was these whole things about values and what are family values versus not family values, and abortion versus choice, and all those the culture wars, I guess is what we called it. Where basically I think it was Al Sharpton who had the great quote that basically people care about what's happening around the dinner table or the breakfast table. They don't want government in their bedroom, that sort of thing. So I
Michael
know,
Allen?
I know that was a long answer.
Oh, it's a great answer, and we're happy you're coming here to Marin. People are going to be saying, what's he doing here running? And we want you to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the folks in Marin and tell us a little bit about what you're about.
Thank you very much, Michael Allen.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joining us now is Lee Domanico. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Marin General Hospital, and he's worked at hospitals from Portland to Chicago to Antioch. During his 6 years at El Camino Hospital in Mountain View, he was nationally recognized as a case study, well, the hospital was, not him, in healthcare industry best practices. Lee is known for establishing healing, patient-centric hospital environments and for early adoption of cutting-edge medical technologies. He's worked in healthcare for more than 30 years with a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and a master's from Stanford University. Lee, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Great to meet you. When healthcare activists first proposed ending the lease with Sutter Health, critics said that the Marin Healthcare District couldn't successfully operate a community hospital in today's environment. After more than a year, tell us how the transition is going and your level of confidence that we can sustain Marin General for years to come.
The transition has gone as well as we could have expected. Very proud of what the organization has accomplished since the transfer. I believe the hospital today is a better hospital than it was about 15 months ago. We've added new services, we've added physicians, we've received awards, and so I feel pretty good about the hospital. Now, as for surviving long term, hospital care is local. It's one physician taking care of one patient with the support of the hospital. So if there's a community that can support a freestanding hospital in California, it's the community of Marin. And for that reason, and similarly, hospitals mirror their community. And so this should be a great hospital. It's in a great community.
So when you say, you used the term standalone hospital, or I thought you used the term standalone hospital. That's a hospital that's unaffiliated with one of the major healthcare providers, Sutter, for example.
Yes.
What are the challenges that really take place in a community when it has a standalone hospital, and how are you coping with them and meeting those challenges?
The biggest challenge, I think, is having access to enough capital to continue the rapid pace of investment that all hospitals need to stay up to date with new technology. And in our case, we have to rebuild the hospital. But because we are a public entity, our partner is the community of Marin. What better partner could there be than the residents of Marin to partner with the hospital for its recapitalization and rebuilding for the future?
Sutter Health has been accused of pulling millions of dollars out of Marin General in the last couple of years before the lease expired. Is this part of your job to pursue that claim, and what is the status of it?
It's true that Sutter transferred upwards of $120 million in the last 3 years while they were still the operator of the hospital. Sutter's never owned the hospital. They were just the operator. And yes, it is part of my responsibility on behalf of this community to try to get the return of that money. That money was generated from the patients, from the community of Marin, who went to Marin General. And that money was generated for the purposes of reinvesting in this community. And so yes, we are pursuing it.
And the status?
The status is that it's in arbitration. The case is scheduled to be heard in January of this year. We're currently in what's called the discovery phase of it. But I will say that obviously we're pursuing it because we don't think it was legal, and we know it wasn't right.
From a patient's point of view, what's changed at Marin General Hospital after the transition?
Well, for example, for the first time in several years, you can now get elective brain surgery neurosurgery at Marin General. For the first time in several years, we now have a colorectal surgeon at Marin General. For the first time in several years, or perhaps ever, you can now get very sophisticated general surgery at Marin General.
So you've expanded,
We have
practice
expanded
groups.
Practice groups. We've brought in new specialists to the community. We've affiliated with UCSF for the provision of neurosurgical services. We've replaced technology. We've organized in a joint venture with our cancer physicians a comprehensive cancer center. We get survival rates for all four stages of cancer. For breast, prostate, lung, and colorectal. We get survival rates here that far exceed predicted and national averages. There's no place else that you should want to go if you are unlucky enough to have one of those cancers.
Now, prior to the transition, there was a group of physicians who were very, very concerned about that. In fact, I think there was a group of physicians who were against it. Since then, since the transition, I've seen some comments by some of the physicians, hey, I was kind of wrong about that, and things are looking pretty good. How has Marin General Hospital changed it for a physician who's working there?
Well, I think the biggest change is that they are finding Marin General to be a very collaborative hospital with them. We started a medical foundation. There are now 60 physicians in that foundation that we are a sponsor of. We've organized, I think now, a half a dozen community primary care clinics that our physicians are partnering with. We partnered, as I mentioned, for a comprehensive cancer center. We have several other partnerships that we're working on right now with other physician subspecialties. So the biggest difference is we see the physicians as our preferred and primary partner going forward.
So I take it you're creating an environment where physicians would want to come to Marin to work and operate in their hospital.
Yes, we are offering a practice environment that we think is more stable long term for those physicians who are in private practice, particularly in primary care. It's very difficult financially. So we are offering the option of joining a larger medical group through the foundation or joining one of our clinics as an option. And thus far, 60 and another 15 in our clinics, 75 physicians have chosen in just the last year those forms of practice.
You have some serious challenges with the physical plant at Marin
Yes.
General, and you basically need to rebuild the whole hospital to seismic standards. Give us a quick sketch of what the capital required will be and what the timeline is projected to be.
To rebuild the hospital, we estimate about $500 million. It's very expensive to meet the current standards for modern-day hospital. We'll rebuild the hospital. It'll have all private rooms, for example, which it doesn't have today. It'll have a design where the public doesn't cross traffic with the patients. Very separate, very private, quiet. And so lots of safety features built in for the future. $500 million. So how are we going to finance that? It's going to be a partnership, we hope, with the philanthropic community and the general community, along with the ability of the hospital to borrow money. And so what that means is that we will do a capital campaign for donors. We will borrow what we can, much like a mortgage, and the remainder we will ask the residents of the district, which is 2/3 central and southern Marin, 2/3 of the county, to support a general obligation bond, which is based on the assessed value of their property, to provide the funding, some of the funding, to rebuild the hospital.
Mm-hmm. One other area I wanted to explore is the new governance structure inserted an operating board between you, the CEO, and the elected trustees of the healthcare district. Can you explain the need for this? And, you know, from my point of view, it was public action that rescued the hospital and canceled the Sutter lease.
Yes.
So this has the impact of reducing the role of public oversight of a public hospital.
Well, I think, on the surface, it may look that way, but the way I see it is we used to tap 5 people that got elected to help support the hospital from a governance perspective. Now we've added another 10 to 13 people that we've chosen based on their business, healthcare, and professional expertise to support the hospital. What I hope to achieve is the best of both worlds in a public-private partnership. We have the public entity which oversees the hospital. It has certain reserved authorities. Hospital can't be sold, can't be merged. We can't reduce services. Lots of public protections. We have a private board to provide their expertise, and we have separated what in the past was some very divisive politics that affected the operation of the hospital. Now that really can't happen because there's a private board in between. So I really think that we have a great solution for governing the hospital here in Marin, and a great solution for rebuilding the hospital because we use the public entity for the GO bond, we use the private board and its foundation, which we also have, to raise philanthropy.
Well, I hope you'll stay sensitive to the needs of the community because that's what was lost under Sutter. And I do understand what you described and the need for efficiency and also to broaden the base of the board that you rely on. But I also think it's very important to retain that community connection.
I agree with you. In our case, it's even bigger than that. We need to enjoy, earn, and build the public's trust. It's invaluable to Marin General. And so there's no other way we can go but to meet the needs of the community and build that trust.
Lee Domanico, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for your work at Marin General, and thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.